Welcome back, grade 12s. In this session, we will focus on the themes of the drama Hamlet by William Shakespeare. So let's look at what the difference is between your themes and your plot. Just a reminder that the plot is a sequence of events that occurs. If you take a timeline, you can actually plot the events on your timeline. So what is the plot of this drama? Basically, it's about a young man who is on a quest to avenge his father's untimely death at the hands of his uncle, and he is hampered in his quest by his uncle externally, who is plotting against him, as well as his internal flaws, and that is basically his propensity to overthink things and therefore to procrastinate in actually avenging his father's death, and that then creates all the drama and the tension in the play itself. So what then is the theme? Basically, the theme in any story is the underlying message or the big idea. So when we do poetry, there are themes in the poems that we've done, in the novel that we have done. In other words, it is basically a critical belief about life that the author is trying to convey to a particular audience. Generally, this belief or idea that the writer wishes to convey is a universal one. And when a theme is universal, it basically touches on the human experience regardless of race, creed, culture, and class differences. Often a piece of writing will have more than one theme, as is the case in the drama that we are studying. You know, in order for me to convey the understanding of a theme to my learners, I often say to them, what do you learn about life, namely the human condition and the world in general in this literary text? So it is whatever you as the reader can extract from the text and the message that you get in order to understand the world better, and also in order to understand human thoughts, human behavior much better. So when we talk about the human condition, and this is an expression that examiners often use, the human condition basically refers to characteristics and key events that compose the essentials of our existence as human beings. So that would include aspects like our birth, growth, the emotions, our aspirations, conflict, mortality. So it's basically everything that makes us human beings in essence. Before we actually delve into the different themes of the drama, let's just look at the elements of a Shakespearean tragedy. And normally a Shakespearean tragedy is structured in 5 parts. Part 1, which is normally Act 1, is the exposition. And what is the exposition? The exposition is like an expose, and it outlines the situation, it introduces the main characters, it begins the action, and it also touches on some of the key themes in the drama. Part 2, which is also Act 2, then delves into the development of key issues that have been referred to in the introduction, and your plot then will gain momentum, and there's also the introduction of certain complications. And in this case with Hamlet, it is the fact that Hamlet is not confident that the ghost is a goblin damned, or that its intentions are good, and so Hamlet then is indecisive about killing his uncle because he does not know if his uncle is actually guilty of the crime. Part 3 then is your crisis or the climax of the text, and it brings everything to its head. In this part, then the protagonist then has to change direction because something has occurred or been precipitated that will eventually lead to the protagonist's death. In this case, It is obviously the killing of Polonius, which has now set Hamlet on a course basically of, in essence, we can call it self-destruction. Part 4 then includes further developments, which inevitably leads to part 5, which is then the final part, the conclusion of the tragedy, in which there is a revelation and the plot is resolved, and ultimately the protagonist, the antagonist, and other characters have by then lost their lives. So we, as mentioned in our previous slides, there is no poetic justice for the protagonist, and as the name suggests, it is a tragedy because there is a tragic loss of life, a loss of opportunities by the protagonist, and just a loss of potential that makes it, in a sense, sad. As mentioned, the drama is a revenge tragedy. We know that Hamlet seeks revenge against Claudius for murdering his father. We also have in the drama Fortinbras, who is also on a quest to avenge his father's death and also reclaim lost territory. Laertes is another young man who seeks to avenge his father's death. In this case, it is Polonius's untimely death at the hands of Hamlet. And then there is a minor character who is briefly mentioned by one of the actors. It is Pyrrhus. He is a character in the play that is recited by the actor, and he is the son of Achilles who seeks vengeance against Priam for killing his father. So you see that even your minor characters contribute to one's understanding of the themes that have been mentioned as well as the plot. Another major theme in the drama is that of betrayal. So let's examine the characters that have all betrayed Hamlet. And if we look at the overall picture, we see that Hamlet is extremely lonely at the court at Elsinore because he has absolutely no one other than Horatio whom he can depend on. His mother, probably for Hamlet, is the ultimate traitor because she betrayed his uncle, she betrayed him by marrying his uncle very soon after her husband's death. So in Hamlet's mind, he's disgusted by her as she had also betrayed the memory of her husband and had not respected, in fact, the mourning period that has been prescribed. In those days, I mentioned earlier that married women, once they have become widowed, they were expected to observe a mourning period which often lasted up to 12 months. He is absolutely disgusted and despises his uncle Claudius, whom the ghost informed him killed his father, and who also steals from Hamlet his mother as well as the throne. Ophelia also betrays Hamlet because she spurns his advances and spies on him at the behest or request of her father and Claudius. His friends Rosencrantz and Guildenstern also betray him because they readily spy on him at the request of the king and queen, and here Claudius pretends that he has Hamlet's health in mind because he wants them to find out what it is that ails Hamlet so that they can then institute measures which will then heal Hamlet from the insanity that he experiences. There is also Laertes, who at the end of the drama engages in a duel with Hamlet and pretends that this is a duel not to the death, but a kind of friendly duel, sporty duel. However, we discover that Laertes has also tipped the uncapped sword with poison, and there is no foil on the tip of the sword because he wants to kill Hamlet at all costs. There's also old Hamlet, who is in a sense betrayed by his brother, who murders him, and he is also betrayed by his wife, whom by all accounts he had loved very dearly, and she betrays his memory by marrying his brother, and he calls him the serpent that now wears his crown. Yet another theme is that of action versus inaction. We do know that Hamlet is not a fighter, he is a thinker. If the drama fits into the literary tradition in which the protagonist must take revenge for somebody who has wronged him, but we also know that Hamlet cannot actually bring himself to take revenge physically. He thinks about it, yes. He considers the moral issues surrounding the action which he has to undertake, but it is his procrastination which is caused by his indecisiveness that leads to the tragedy in the drama. There is very early on the suggestion that his indecisiveness leads to his own death, as well as ultimately to the deaths of quite a number of characters. There are other characters, though, who act immediately, even impulsively, and the playwright seems to suggest that an imbalance of either one of these qualities leads to destruction. So on the one hand, we have Hamlet, who is indecisive and fails to act, and on the other hand, we have Laertes and even Fortinbras, who are impetuous and impulsive, and they act without much thought. And acting without much thought can also be as dangerous and have as disastrous consequences as basically failing to act. Another major theme in the drama is that of appearance versus reality. So what is appearance versus reality? Basically, it is the theme where characters deceive other characters by pretending to be something or some other which they are not. So on the one hand, you have the image as those around them see them. For example, everybody thinks that Claudius is this very charming, suave king, but on the other hand, he is also quite Machiavellian, quite evil, who plots against Hamlet and has also killed his own brother. So it is a matter of a person almost wearing a mask and then deceiving characters, because what they see is the mask and they do not see the real person underneath the mask. So the difference between what seems, namely the appearance, and what is, in other words, the reality, is a critical component of this drama. All the characters, in one way or another, are hiding their true intentions. Hamlet pretends, for example, to be insane in order to determine the truth behind his own father's death. Claudius pretends to be a concerned uncle-father, while in the meantime he is plotting to assassinate Hamlet and has also employed his old school friends to spy on Hamlet. Note, he pretends that he has Rosencrantz and Guildenstern spying on Hamlet in order to heal him of a certain affliction or illness. However, he actually wants to determine or ascertain whether Hamlet is posing a threat to him and whether Hamlet is plotting against him. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern appear to have Hamlet's interests at heart, and they might have had his interests at heart, but one gets a sense that they are more interested in feathering their own nests, and therefore they spy on Hamlet at the request of the king and queen because they want to impress the king and queen. And surely they probably have figured out that if they are sycophantic enough, then they might be rewarded by the monarch. Ophelia spies on Hamlet under her father's instructions, and she pretends that she is returning his gifts, but the meeting between them has been planned or orchestrated. Polonius spies on Hamlet whilst he is hiding behind the arras, and such an appropriate image there. It basically sums up Polonius's character. He does many things behind a screen or behind the scenes. And he also encourages others to do that. So it perfectly shows this concept of appearance and reality. Laertes hides his intention to kill Hamlet by using a poisoned sword. For example, he pretends at the end of the drama to have forgiven Hamlet for killing his father, but in the meantime, he is actually, his real intention is to kill Hamlet. So very little in the play is actually what it seems, and as mentioned, many of the characters actually hide their true intentions. Another theme in the drama is that of corruption and disease. So we know that at the beginning of the drama, Hamlet bemoans the fact that Denmark is an unweeded garden because there is so much moral corruption at court. So there's a constant reference to various power struggles. There are characters scheming against each other, and Hamlet often refers to the fact that the country is in a state of decay. And we can understand this. It is in a state of decay because Claudius has usurped the throne. There is much manipulation of other characters, and generally the court is in a state of moral decay, and this decay has infected the country as a whole. In medieval times, people believed that the health of a nation was connected to the legitimacy of the king. And we know that Claudius is not the legitimate king because he disrupted the chain of being by assassinating old Hamlet. Hamlet generally describes Denmark as being poisoned, diseased, corrupt under Claudius's leadership. And it is as if the poison that Claudius has poured into old Hamlet's ear has spread throughout Denmark itself. And Hamlet often mentions, corruption and rot. And as mentioned, he describes his world as an unweeded garden and constantly refers to things that are decomposing or rotting. Hamlet, however, does not only see Denmark as being corrupt and diseased. It seems as if he sees his entire life as being totally corrupted. If he thinks of women, he thinks of women's sexuality, women wearing makeup to hide their age, the mentioning of worms feeding on corpses, people lying to get their way. So all of these gives the audience a sense that Hamlet's world is pervaded by corruption and decay, and it's almost inescapable. And this is what Hamlet bemoans in his soliloquies. One other theme is that of death and mortality. There is so much death in the drama itself. And Hamlet, as well as the gravediggers, at some point comment on, mortality. Mortality refers to death. So at some point, one feels that Hamlet is quite morbid for a young man because, he contemplates whether he should or should not commit suicide. And basically, it's a comment on the human condition and questions we pose and about life and about our own deaths. Almost every character and relationship in the drama experiences some form of physical or metaphorical death. Death begins the play, it drives the play, and ultimately it concludes the play. There is death by murder, there is death by suicide, and also this reflection on mortality, namely King Hamlet's death and the deaths of so many other characters. Hamlet, on one hand, seems comfortable, thinks that are dead. He idolizes his father. He claims to love Ophelia, but one gets a sense he only proclaims his real love for Ophelia once she has died, and he rejects her and treats her quite disrespectfully while she is alive. He handles Yorick's skull at the end of the drama with much care when he contemplates what happens to us when we die, in fact to all human beings when we die. It is then ultimately the great leveler. By the end of the drama, Hamlet argues that the only true reality in life is death, and he seems to view all life as an appearance. No matter what we do in life and what the characters do in the drama, seeking power, lying, committing murder, and engaging in different illicit activities, are all performed to prevent us from facing the one reality that ultimately, at the end of our lives, faces us, and that is death. Then there is also the subservient role of women that is addressed in the drama. And as modern readers, we perhaps pick up on nuances that the playwright might not have intended. So we learn much about the patriarchal structure which existed during that particular period in Elizabethan England and during the Renaissance. Remember that women were basically seen as being fickle, as being seductive, and that perception of women is has been drawn from the biblical form where Eve was seduced by the devil and then in turn seduced Adam. And so therefore women are seen as being weak-willed and untrustworthy and as being overtly sexual and sensual and seductive creatures. And so this is the same kind of perception that Hamlet has. And the women are portrayed in the drama, especially Gertrude is seen as being extremely fickle and weak because she marries Claudius soon after her husband's death, and she is also seen as a temptress and a seductress in the same way that Hamlet sees Ophelia. In the drama, the women are actually quite subservient. They have no real voice. Gertrude and Ophelia come across as mere biddable pawns in a political game that is basically played by the males which dominate the world that they live in. Hamlet is extremely misogynistic. He hates women, and this is seen in his behavior towards Ophelia and Gertrude, where he basically degrades them virulently and almost inexcusably. Both women die when they rebel against their patriarchal bonds. If you look at Gertrude, she defies her husband by drinking the poison from the chalice and then she dies. Ophelia, on the other hand, is unable to cope with the world in which she lives in because her father has died. And remember, he basically is her puppet master who instructs her what to do. And so she cannot think on her own. And therefore, she then eventually has to die because there is no other way for her to survive, with her brother being absent from court and then also with Hamlet having rejected her. Gertrude's quick marriage to Claudius, although it is incestuous and considered immoral, is also possibly the only way for her to maintain her status and power. Ophelia, on the other hand, has even fewer actions. As a woman left alone after the death of her father, she cannot act at all. And so what is the only recourse for her is to wait for her brother Laertes to come back and to take revenge on his father's murderer. Ophelia's predicament is symbolic of the position of women in general in Hamlet and also in the society in which they live. They are absolutely, totally dependent on the men. All three of the men in Ophelia's life define her almost exclusively in terms of her sexuality and beauty. There is only one minor scene in the drama where we see her as being a bit feisty and intelligent, when she reminds her brother that he should follow his advice that he gives her, because she realizes that he is quite the libertine and he is telling her that she must not be liberal with her affections towards Hamlet. That is the only point in the drama where you see a little hint of fire in Ophelia. But for the rest, she is merely just a little pawn, a little puppet that is controlled by the male figures in her life. Another theme is that of insanity and reasoning. Hamlet fakes madness and puts on an antic disposition, but we also know that there is method in his madness because he wants to determine his uncle's guilt. It is also very much Hamlet's soliloquies is also a portrayal of his existential struggle with issues of a moral nature. Remember, Hamlet is torn between what society expects of him and also what his deep religious beliefs have led him to believe is expected of him. Shakespeare also engages the audience in an exploration of the self-destructive process that can result from indecisiveness about a moral dilemma. Ophelia's insanity, on the other hand, is quite genuine. It is referred to as a document in madness. And is it possible at all that a young maid's wits should be as mortal as an old man's life? And so, with the death of her father then, she also experiences a death of her sanity. We also know that Ophelia is at some point also a foil for Hamlet, because he pretends to be mad and she really goes insane and eventually kills herself. Finally, the drama to a great extent also examines family bonds, relationships between parents and their children. And so both families that we meet, the Polonius family and Hamlet's family, are both dysfunctional families. Hamlet's father has died and his mother has married his uncle very soon after her first husband's death, and Hamlet despises his uncle. His uncle pretends to have Hamlet's interests at heart, but is plotting to kill him. And so you can see that indeed this is a very dysfunctional family. Polonius is almost like your modern helicopter parent who is more concerned about his own status and spies on his children. He does not really give them a voice. He stifles Ophelia's creativity. He stifles her individuality. In essence, then he basically stifles her. So he has basically reared a young woman who is his puppet. Hamlet idolizes his father. He refers to him as Hyperion or sun god, whereas he utterly hates Claudius and does not see him as a veritable, respectable father figure. We do know, though, that Gertrude's love and concern for Hamlet is quite genuine. We know that Hamlet's Laertes and Fortinbras are all sons who are engaged in quests to avenge their father's deaths. And so, as we can see, the family bonds that do exist also reflect perhaps what all families sometimes experience when a father figure dies, and then it throws the entire family into disarray. When a father does not treat his children with respect, as Polonius does, and then it can also lead to a disaster of some kind. We also know that Hamlet feels obligated to avenge his father's death because of the ghost's instructions. That then brings us to the conclusion of the various themes. Now, that being said, you would have had quite a list of themes that the educators have shared with you. So familiarize yourself with these. In the texts, for example, when you are questioned in the examination, there will be questions on the various themes. And so you need to examine the text that you have been given and then identify what themes are addressed. And if you examine the text closely, you can see that each text basically lends itself to an incorporation of so many different themes. As long as you can clearly state the evidence for whatever opinion it is that you have, and then you will obviously have a very convincing argument to leg and have a strong leg to stand on.